Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. This is my unfiltered review of Ancient Evil, but it's also a wider commentary and video essay of sorts about the state of Black Ops 4 Zombies and the community. As you all know, I've been a harsh critic of Black Ops 4 Zombies in the past. I want nothing more than the game to achieve the full potential we all know it could one day reach, but the journey to that destination has not been, and will not be, an easy one. Today, we're gonna see whether Treyarch have put a step forward in the right direction here, or if this map just keeps trundling down the long and lonely road of missed expectations that we're all too familiar with at this point. Before we begin, I've got two things to say. I want to make sure there's no confusion here about sponsorship or any similar necessary disclosure. While other YouTubers were flown out to Treyarch to record this map early and give direct feedback to the Zombies dev team, I wasn't invited to capture anything or speak to any devs. I was sad I wasn't invited. I feel like I'm somewhat uniquely positioned to give clear, actionable feedback from across the community, but clearly Activision didn't think it would have been appropriate this time round. I trust that they made this decision with good intentions, and I'm hopeful that if there are other opportunities in future to give feedback, I can get involved. So in summary, that first point that I wanted to make is that I've got nothing to disclose really. I'm speaking solely of my experience with the map since it publicly released. The other thing I wanted to say is that to celebrate the kind of midpoint ending of the Chaos story, I'm currently selling Purge the Blight t-shirts for the next 10 days or so, but we're gonna run out soon, so if you want a shirt for yourself, there's a link in the description down below, waffles.ownage.com, mark the end of Chaos with a t-shirt. Why not? Okay, with those things out of the way, let's get started. I strongly believe that Zombies maps have two very separate modes of consumption which need to be considered when undertaking any review. The first mode is the kind of standard thing we're used to. Whether you're playing a week or a year after launch, you'll always be able to boot up any Zombies map and just play zombies on it. Maybe doing the Easter egg, looking up a guide and doing that, maybe doing a side quest, or going for a high round, or just messing about until you die. This falls in the basket of regular ongoing play, and it's something I'll come back to later. The second mode of consumption is something that's much less easy to pin down. It's, broadly speaking, the experience of being a Zombies fan. It's the anticipation leading up to a new game. It's the frantic tuning in to the community reveal to see what's coming next. It's piecing together torn up marketing PNGs to decipher a hidden language, or waiting for the patch to copy painfully slowly to your hard drive after downloading, and most importantly, it's the rush to hunt down the Easter egg or any surrounding side quests when a map comes out. I cannot stress enough how important this mode of consumption is to consider when analyzing any Zombies map. Your map can be the best designed, most beautiful piece of creative work you've ever shipped, and you can pour your heart and blood and soul into a map for every waking hour of every day, with your social life and your health and your relationships breaking apart from the colossal sacrifice you're making for the sake of your art. And then everything you did can be torn into little tiny pieces, set alight to burn and burn, crucified in the court of public opinion if your map doesn't get any marketing or your game just blue screens on launch. And I know that sounds cruel, and I say this in the full knowledge that game dev is filthy difficult. I say it knowing full well that real people with real emotions are making these games, and sometimes maps simply aren't finished yet, so you can't make a trailer, or your publisher won't let you move a release date, so you have to go live with no marketing. And it isn't your fault that Sony put the map live early in certain regions, and you aren't to blame for the one singular person in your testing pipeline who made the silly decision to force the game to close whenever it faced any old script error or minor exception that the player would never see, rather than doing what it had always done in the past and just letting the game continue running. Believe me, I recognize the nuance here. This is not a cut and dry, black and white thing where blame can easily be placed on one particular person in one particular place, and that's that. But the truth of the matter is that whether you're an artist, animator, writer, coffee machine, or engineer, it's the collective output of the studio that's going to be judged. And if the experience of being a Zombies fan hits an uncomfortable hurdle, player experiences and opinions across the board are going to suffer. Now, if you're a Treyarch dev and you're watching this and you've just winced through the last minute and a half of what I've just said, the good news is that Ancient Evil has none of these problems. And I'm relieved to say that Ancient Evil is a breath of fresh air. Unlike Dead of the Night, we knew the name of this map and its likely release date several weeks in advance. In the week leading up to launch, Treyarch released a story-specific teaser, a full map trailer, the map's intro cutscene, and streamed a short interview with some extra questions answered from Jason Blundell and Craig Houston. YouTubers were able to play the map early and post early gameplay, which I feel is also an important part of the hype building process for any new release. The map was set up for success, or rather, it wasn't set up to fail in the way that I feel like Dead of the Night was, which is a good start. Then, the Easter egg hunt began when the map came out, and suddenly, I felt like I was playing a Black Ops 1 map that got lost in the post before finally arriving on my doorstep 9 years later. This map genuinely has one of the best designed Easter eggs of all time, drawing unmistakable energy from Indiana Jones and subtle quest design reference from Shangri-La. The Easter egg in this map is a visual story. It's an interactive transformation of the space around you, and most importantly, it's simply a puzzle that you can solve by using the clues provided. Over the last few years, Zombies Easter eggs have mutated away from their roots in riddles and lateral thinking puzzles and become exercises in randomness, brute force, and, by association in a lot of cases, futility. The Revelations Bone Step is touted as one of the most egregious examples of this, but plenty of other fan-favorite maps concede the same mistakes. One of my favorite examples is Gorod Krovi, a map which many in the community proudly call their favorite, and that was a smash hit during its release in Black Ops 3's DLC season. In the Gorod Easter egg, you need to artillery strike a puddle to get a trophy to emerge out of it. There are no hints towards this, no smart clues, no underlying lore, no. Treyarch designed this Easter egg step simply to arbitrarily slow down the solution of the egg, relying on the large volume of people playing the map to ensure that eventually someone would happen to rocket strike it and the community would then move forwards. It wasn't rewarding, it didn't feel fun, it was random, and it was bad quest design. Ancient Evil makes a clean break from these design choices of the past. This break happens actually as soon as you open the game and look at your Easter egg progress wheel in the bottom left corner of your HUD. Previous maps have had clues here too, of course, but the difference is made when you consider the chemistry they have with the player's actions as you play through the egg. Broadly speaking, the first thing you do in the quest causes a burning beam of light to shoot through a circular opening in the rocky roof which conceals the buried city from the rest of the world. As a player, you've already seen a huge array of brass mirrors around the cavern of the map, and now that you've completed the first step, you have a massive beam of light to play with? Maybe we can figure something out here. A clear picture of the Easter egg's general shape crystallizes instantly in the player's mind. You need to redirect the light, but where is the light going? Maybe we aren't too sure to begin with. Then, we complete the next step and we find that a crystal present in the map is now being used as a beam splitter, transmitting and reflecting the beam into separate paths that point to opposite parts of the map. The player is then able to continue piecing things together. If we're redirecting the beam, now we have two beams to work with, so we probably need to focus our efforts in the two parts of the map where the beam is currently obstructed. There are objects in those areas that are clearly related to the egg, such as a large gold sundial or a brass mirror submerged at the bottom of a public bath. The progress wheel continues to give clues that feel relevant and reinforce the assumptions that the player is making based on the things that the player has just learned. And the steps reward logical consideration of all of these ideas. The beam, starting in one place and gradually being reflected to more and more parts of the map, is not only an encouragement for the player, but also a meaningful indicator as to what is coming next. On top of this, you can go further and say the beam also lets the player's mind wander to where the culmination of the Easter egg may lead, which is an enjoyable and tantalizing carrot on the end of the Easter egg stick. As you play through, you eventually recombine the split beam and redirect it into the underworld area of the map, which is exactly where it feels like it should end up going, which is great. It's at this point that you hit the only part of the quest that I don't massively like, because it feels less logically coherent than the steps preceding it, but it still isn't too bad. The beam ends up being redirected by your character randomly pressing on a door in a cutscene, which certainly isn't something you'd imagine solving with careful reasoning or puzzle solving skills, and you're then presented with a crossbow or ballista that you need to fire. The cutscene, while cool and a fun twist, is pretty poor in my opinion. However, the ballista is really cool. It's a fresh, new addition to the space around you, which you need to figure out how to interact with. Unfortunately, ultimately the method of choice Treyarch goes for here isn't very satisfying. You just do a weird thing with a trap and it's kind of the same as in Dead of the Night. It's just not that inventive. However, this is one less interesting moment in an otherwise fantastic Easter egg quest, so I'm honestly just not that pressed. With that done, you enter the boss fight. Now, the boss is pretty straightforward. You shoot a thing, you do some damage, then you shoot a different thing, you do some more damage, and the fight kinda ends. You gotta move around a little bit, but honestly, it's not that overly clever, which is a good thing, to be honest, and I personally didn't feel like it gave me the usual kind of frenzied rush that I get going through boss fights. In my opinion, it was a little bit bullet spongy and slow, but my teammates all felt it was really exciting, and so this definitely isn't something that I'm going to criticize a huge amount. Sometimes that just happens when you get to a boss fight. One player happens to have a really easy time, and that kind of devalues the whole thing, and I think that's happened to me here. I'm not particularly heated about it. Then, when you beat the boss, you're rewarded with an incredibly long ending cutscene, and the game ends. Now, that end cutscene is great. It actually feels like the egg is worth doing to get to that point and see that cutscene, and it sets us up nicely for the future. But this is going to start spilling over to story territory, and I want to get to that in a moment, but I first want to finish my thoughts on the quest design, okay? So we will come back to this. On the whole, the egg is fantastic. It felt incredible to actually feel like I was working through a proper, thoughtful set of clues again, rather than having to rely on randomness to just solve the egg outright. Seeing the light move around the map as we progressed was a brilliant, constant mood boost and allowed for so much more creative thinking and exploration than is usually possible in less coherent Easter egg steps. Time and time again, I found myself and the community has found itself stuck at a particular step in a quest, only to realize that the method of solution is some dumb, arbitrary thing that you could never have figured out from a smart inference or a logical conclusion based on the evidence in front of you. And the fact that that was mostly dodged here was great. Overall, I love the Easter egg, but it's important to ask, how can Treyarch capture this energy and do it again in the future? If this was so fun, what do they do to make the next map fun as well? Simple as this may sound, I think designing your Easter egg around a single core theme and really honestly sticking to that theme is a very easy shortcut to getting into really good puzzle territory. Let's talk about a few hypothetical maps that definitely don't exist and run through some ideas for how we could give their quests a theme and then iterate on that theme to create some great moments for the player. Map idea number 1, Egypt. Let's say there's a pharaoh's tomb deep within the center of a pyramid, but maybe the tomb is stuck at the bottom of a very deep empty well. You want to access the tomb, so your egg could revolve around the idea of you moving various stone blocks and obstacles around the pyramid interior in order to reroute a nearby water source, filling the well, and in turn granting you access to the tomb itself. This is obviously a very derivative idea. It's just ancient evil with a different lick of paint. I'm making no illusions about that, but I don't think it would be any less fun. This concept is applicable in a fairly general sense, and I mean, you can see straight away, it's easy to come up with countless cool ideas for secrets the pyramid might be hiding, with loads of inspiration available in popular culture. I mean, you can even look to things like game shows for inspiration here. There's a huge opportunity in this area. Map idea number 2, Northern France. Okay, yep, I'm just gonna tell you straight up, I'm talking about Origins here. Origins has already used this idea to an extent, and Origins is an egg that people absolutely love. I still think that it's got room for improvements, but the Vorkuta steps at least act as a running theme, and everything in the map springs from them. They stand in as our checklist in lieu of having a visual progress bar in the map like a redirected beam of light or our Egyptian trickle of water. It's a great way to progress through a quest and feel like you're running through it in a cohesive fashion. Map idea number 3 that definitely doesn't already exist, Shangri-La. Okay, I'm just naming old side quests at this point, but that's because Shang understood this better than most maps ever have done. The quest in Shang tells its own story, based on the core concept of assisting Brock and Gary, with each step giving a thematic task, which directly follows on from whatever unfortunate death scenario the pair of explorers have just suffered through. You compare the quest of Shang to the quest of Transit, for example, and in Transit, there's never really a point where I go, ah yes, this was that story moment where this thing happened and we killed the Avogadro. No, that was just doing a thing to do a thing for the sake of doing the thing. Whereas in Shang, it's actually part of the canon. It's part of the story of Brock and Gary, how they die and are reset and die and reset and die and reset again. It's fantastic. Shang is a masterpiece. It got massively slept on, It's a great quest. These are just a few examples, right? But my point, hopefully, is clear. The quest in Ancient Evil is fantastic, and while the heavy RNG that's required for Apollo's Flame, or your Dormant Hand finds, for example, is bad for speedrunners, the variety of the tribute system and the ease of building those redeemed hands allows for much more varied gameplay than the challenges, for example, in Zetsubo, or more tricky wonder weapons that we've been able to build in other previous maps. I think overall, all the steps in the egg really contribute a net positive to the map, which is great to see. Okay, with all of that said, deep breath. Let's talk story. Craig, I hope you're listening, mate, because this one's for you. The reason I love mythology so much is because all of the gods, whether they're Greek or Norse or Egyptian or otherwise, all have massive, electric, bubbling personalities. They sell the stories of their antics in a way that could never be achieved otherwise. The tricks, the treachery, the lust, the bravado, the flaws and the failings of the gods, and all those around them as well, the kings and queens, etc., leads to a fantastically fun melting pot of characters, and it's the contrast with all of them bouncing off each other that makes it feel so fun to explore those worlds. Think of a game like God of War, for example, God of War 4 for PS4. That game's story is an absolute masterclass in taking this rich mythos that the Norse and Greek mythology has and transforming it into a new story while honoring all of that previous source material to such a great extent. It's fantastic. And Ancient Evil makes strides in going in a similar direction. It finally does what I've been waiting for the Chaos story to do since it started 6-7 months ago, and it honors the mythology it draws from. The map plunges you deep into Greek mythos from the very first round, I mean from the intro cutscene really, and there are countless interactable objects around the map that fill out the world for you and give you a little bit of backstory about different gods, different kings, etc. They tell you how Treyarch have taken Greek myth and shaped those myths to fit the new world that they've created, and as a player, yes, you're better off for already knowing the story of Pegasus, Medusa, or Perseus before you play, but you're not punished if you go in blind. Instead, you're pulled up to speed, which makes the world feel massive, by the way, which is great, and it really feels like you're dipping into an unfolding tale that just happened to never make its way into the history books. It's a resounding success. I think it's important to nail down why this works so well. Zombies in its very beginnings was a mode which gripped its community with its weird, emergent story straight away, because it was grounded firmly in conspiracies that felt, at least, like they could actually have some basis in truth. All of the mysteries surrounding the Thule Society, Vril Yar, Roswell, Tunguska, the Cold War, World War II, all those elements were brain food for the zombies community. And that wasn't stuff that the Treyarch sound team dreamt up all on their own. I mean, they were writing the story, but they were standing on the shoulders of giant conspiracies arching back sometimes tens, sometimes hundreds of years, and that all culminated in the community being on the edge of their seat at all times, feeling like the zombies mode was telling you a hidden history that you just couldn't find anywhere else. It was electric, and that magic has largely disappeared over the years. With Chaos, Treyarch had a fantastic opportunity to design an entirely new story based directly around that one central axiom, that real myth and legend would inspire the narrative and breathe new life into new stories, giving the community room to dig as deep as they like into those previously established stories and make their own theories about where they might head or what a certain character's motivations might be, is essential if that story is going to gain traction in this community. And I feel like 9, Voyage, and even Dead of the Night kinda missed out on getting this right. The gods in those maps simply have no personality. There's just no reason to care. It feels a bit too sterile. But Ancient Evil completely does a 180 here. It's a much better map for it, and it's a great place to leave Chaos for now, and is a hopeful springboard too for future maps in other seasons of Zombies releases. Craig, you did a really good job here, and I think it's important for me to mention that Craig has a writing team under him now. It's not just him doing all the work. You guys have done a great job here too. I want to make that clear. Now, it isn't all rosy. One thing that I didn't like so much in Ancient Evil was the way Perseus was discarded as a character. It felt like Treyarch just needed an easy generic boss for us to beat and then never think about ever again, but it didn't sell particularly well for me when previously in the egg, we were told that Perseus could kill the weakened sleeping gods with ease if he wished, and then he just kind of dies and that's it? Really? His quest to reign over Olympus is vaguely described at best, and questionably motivated, really, and you end up unsure if he actually did take control or if something else entirely has been taking place the whole time. I mean, maybe it's too early in the story to be absolute about these things, and maybe the Oracle has been feeding us lies the whole time in an attempt to manipulate us to get him taken down. But however you slice it, I would have at least appreciated some better character development on his part. Now, there's one other gripe that I have with the story in the map, and that's that midway through the egg, the Oracle reveals the names of her two sisters, and they very clearly match the names of the sisters of Medusa. Now, it felt obvious from the beginning that the Oracle might be Medusa in disguise. I mean, I even said in my trailer breakdown before the map came out that her hood could be covering a head full of snakes. That would just be a very easy turn for them to pull off, and that's exactly what happened. But it was completely unnecessary to bludgeon the player over the head with a reminder that you were going to be double-crossed before the egg was even over. I mean, we saw it coming, but you didn't need to spell it out like that. It was way too on the nose for my liking, and I don't think it added any value to the map at all, so in my opinion, that was a weird decision from Treyarch. This, though, is clearly a tiny gripe. And it's so nice to have a tiny gripe with the story instead of some of the huge gripes that we've had in the past. Like, I'm splitting hairs at this point, and it feels damn good to do so because it means that, for the most part, they did a bloomin' good job here. The story is set up really well for plenty of interesting stuff to happen in the future, and I think that if we get more maps of this caliber, Chaos could have a pretty bright future. Okay, so I've talked about the egg, and I've talked about the story, which are two of the primary pillars of the game mode, but now I'm going to pivot back to what I started the video talking about, that first mode of consumption of the map, which comes after the initial hunt is over and everyone is just playing the map normally as they might do on any given day. What is a player going to think if they boot up Ancient Evil and just play some zombies on it? Well, I'm going to kind of dodge that question, and I'm not going to talk about the map layout or the new perk, or the tribute system, or how the map is for speedrunners, or for high rounders, because I think that all the positives and negatives in those areas are overshadowed by a more important conversation. Ultimately, Black Ops 4 Zombies has a very deep-rooted problem in that people perceive for there to be less content for them to play through in this game. This flies in the face of the fact that Black Ops 4 is the most updated Call of Duty there has ever been, and we have more maps at this point in the game than we ever have done before. And yet, the community is mostly dormant. It's hardly playing the game, it's hardly talking about the game, it's hardly watching videos, etc. Now, I want to be clear because people often misunderstand this, and this is a point that I think David Vonderhaar would gladly back me up on. The community that I'm talking about here is not just the vocal Reddit community, and it's not just the vocal YouTube comments community or the Twitter mentions of the devs or myself or anyone else. It's much more broad than that, okay? There is a community playing this game made up of hundreds of thousands of players, many of which aren't touching the internet when they play at all. And it's important to realize that this is a bigger conversation. This is not just about the most dedicated people who are speedrunning the map constantly and are grinding for dark matter and things like that. It's talking about the general player. So what's going on with the fact that fewer people are playing the game, which is a fact that is apparent to see. You can't get away from it. It isn't a toxicity problem, and in this case, it isn't caused by leaks either. It's one, a PR problem that Treyarch are thankfully beginning to make steps towards solving, and two, a wider design problem that I just don't think can be solved in the lifespan of this game. I had hope. I had a lot of hope last year, and that hope, day by day, gets dimmer and dimmer. I simply don't feel the magnetic pull that I once did to keep coming back and replaying the same maps over and over, day in, day out, without meaningful progression or rewards. And I think that this applies to most people playing the game. Again, not necessarily the most vocal because they're still playing it every single day. People like Greg or Smart Guy or Ray or what have you have so much playtime on this game that it averages out at like 5 hours per day since launch with no breaks. Like, there are clearly some people engaging very strongly with the game but they are a tiny minority. And I think that if there was a more engaging progression or reward system, that wouldn't be the case. It wouldn't be such a narrow slice, and it would be more like the community that we all saw in Black Ops 3, Black Ops 2, etc. In feedback videos, plenty of community members, such as myself, have shouted from the rooftops about Treyarch maybe adding cosmetics, or adding Easter egg loot rewards with random rolls, or using factions to try and save the community. But I think it's important to face the music here, because otherwise we're gonna continue on the trajectory that we're currently on. Treyarch have limited time and limited resources, and that's always been true. But because Zombies has such a small player base in this game, and especially so compared to Blackout and MP, those limited resources are going to become even smaller, until we're at a point where the devs only have time to fulfill the DLC requirements imposed by the Black Ops Pass, and then just straight up move on to making their next game. I'm being completely honest when I say I think it's unrealistic at this point to expect any single map to revive the community, because this isn't a map problem. It's a studio problem and a mode problem. And that's going to take a lot more introspection to solve than I think Treyarch has time for this year. This isn't me just blindly hating or only being negative, as people love to repeat over and over again that I'm apparently doing. It's me trying to set expectations up for reality. And that's that this game has issues, and those issues are going to be very hard to solve. It's not going to be an easy task. I don't think, even if Ancient Evil was a perfect Zombies map, that it alone could have solved those problems, and as such, I'm not going to hold it to that standard. That's why I'm shying away here from talking too much about mode of consumption number 1. Mode of consumption number 1 has much bigger fish to fry than whether Ancient Evil is actually fun or not. So, because of all this, I personally don't expect the wider player base to keep playing this map for more than a couple weeks after launch, and I'm not holding the map accountable for that. The hyper-vocal portion of the community will probably play the map a bunch, and that's great. I'm all for that, and that will happen because their consumption of individual maps hasn't changed as drastically from the old formula that used to work for everybody else in Black Ops 3 and before. I mean, I think had this map released during Black Ops 3, it could be lauded as one of the most exciting Easter eggs of all time, and would certainly have had a longer lifespan than it's going to now that it's released in 2019. It's got great work in it from the devs, and it's a clear showing that Treyarch Studios is full of talent and great ideas, which is always refreshing to be reminded of. So I emphatically recommend you give this map a go if you're on the fence. It's a solid piece of work, but I think I would be overstepping and infantilizing the situation if I said that it's the turning point for Black Ops 4 Zombies. That turning point will only come if Activision are willing to pour more money into the mode to get it back on its feet. And ultimately, only time will tell if they're willing to bet on that horse. Treyarch have been the underdog before and come through with flying colors to become everyone's favorite. And for Zombies now, Treyarch are in a bit of an underdog position again. I think it would be careless of me to proclaim here that I think Treyarch can do it if they just do everything right, and that I've got a lot of faith in them going forwards, because that would set me up, and that would set my viewers up, and the rest of the community paying attention up for sour disappointment if Treyarch slips up even in the slightest and things don't go as we hope. It's a very difficult predicament, and I have a lot of sympathy for the devs, but I also am very painfully aware that the decisions that have been made that have led up to this point, as much as they suck for the developers involved, I'm sure, are going to have ramifications for the future health and longevity of the mode. And as much as the community needs to face the music, that things are going to be rough for a while, I think the devs also need to some extent, because I appreciate that game dev is hard, but that isn't going to bring people back. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. I've tried to be as fair and balanced as I could, as always, and I've given you an honest breakdown of everything I think that's been surrounding Ancient Evil. I've tried my best to be honest with you guys from the beginning, and that's only going to continue from here. Because I'm clearly a sellout, I'm going to remind you one last time about the Ancient Evil shirts that we're selling in the description down below, waffles.ownage.com. For now though, I'm going to sign out and hope that no forest fires start in the comment section of this video. I'm sure this one's going to end up on Reddit. I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.